Hi folks, welcome to RJ Impact. Well, after a benign start, and at least for his defence examination, a chance for Sam to explain some of the goings on with it in FTX and its collapse from his perspective, and which allowed some counter-strikes or narratives against the government case, we then had his cross-examination. Oh dear. I nearly read out crash examination then because things did not go well. In what was undoubtedly the gamble of his life, he's taken the stand, and now we see why defendants in criminal cases rarely take that step, as the prosecutors took their turn to examine his testimony. I suppose it does make a change for Sam, gambling with his life, I guess, instead of gambling with the lives of his customers, when he used their funds to support his own risky investments. Let's get to it. Before going through any specifics, let me just give you the essence of the whole of the cross-examination. So it was Daniel Sassoon for the prosecution who was the questioner, and unlike his defence answers, which appear to relay and get across key information and details supporting his narrative, he juxtaposed three basic styles in his answers. There was the curt yep or no style, the rambling on and on and on and missing the point style, and the I can't remember style. Particularly on his rambling answers, the judge was having none of it, and SBF was admonished several times. Please answer the question was a refrain that was heard in court often. We know that SBF was a great chaser of the public side of FTX. Remember the magazine covers, the parties with Tom Brady and so on, and big business, the tweets. And even after the implosion of FTX, his lengthy interviews with the likes of Bloomberg. Well, all this came back to bite him, as we'll see. Sassoon essentially exploded this claim that SBF was someone who just got overcome by the success of FTX and failed to recognise the troubles, including the misuse of customer monies. Essentially, for every question Sam had an answer to, Sassoon had a contradiction in the way of a clip, a tweet, a public statement, or a private statement from Sam himself, which shows the difference between what he says and said and what he does or did. For example, she showed him describing FTX customers as dumb motherfuckers. Well, perhaps a certain subset of them, SBF responded. Well, I bet that went down well amongst the jury, who were primarily non-financial in respect of their careers and background. It was okay to use customer funds. Well, was it? So SBF said under direct that he thought it was permissible for Alameda to spend FTX customer funds, but he'd not been made aware until October 2022. I deeply regret not taking a deeper look into it, he said. Explain why, Sassoon essentially asked him. Because he trusted that his former friends and deputies had the situation under control. I was told they were busy and should stop asking questions, he said. Why didn't he take action when Ellison failed to hedge bets better? And he acknowledged he didn't take action in response to the failure. I wasn't particularly interested in trying to dole out blame, he said, in explaining his decision not to fire anyone. It generally wasn't something I tried to prioritise as a leader. Favouritism, spending and unfairly prioritising some customers? Sassoon pointed out that he'd had a cosy relationship with a member of the Bahamian government. He'd attended dinner with no less than the President. Bill Clinton and Tony Blair were there also. Do you remember saying to the Bahamian President you'd help repay its national debt? I don't remember that, he said. Did you give him 4 seats at the Miami Heat Arena? I don't remember that. And as the crunch happened, he opened up withdrawals to all Bahamian customers. This was only for a short period of time, he said. There was a focus in on one of the key meetings in June 2022 when Wang, Ellison, Singh and SBF were all present. Ellison had told the group that she feared Alameda was bankrupt. Now, in the weeks following that meeting, Ellison authorised billions of repayments to Alameda customers, essentially coming from the customers of FTX. You never got to the bottom of that, he was asked. The 3 most senior people at the company were working on it. I trusted them, SBF said. He thought that Alameda's debts were manageable, roughly $2 billion. And he was very surprised in October when he found the amount was more than $8 billion. You didn't tell your employees, don't spend the FTX customer money. I don't recall giving any directions, SBF said. I deeply regret not taking a deeper look into it. Is it your testimony that some unknown person spent $8 billion without your knowledge? You didn't call in your deputies and employees and say, who spent $8 billion? Sassoon showed the court a private note that SBF wrote after the collapse, which said, if Alameda had been 100% separate, completely unrelated to trading firm in every way, this wouldn't have happened. And that itself sure seems to imply SBF knew exactly what happened. What about telling people that FTX is a safe exchange? He didn't remember saying that, so we have his tweet saying assets are fine and FTX has enough to cover all client holdings. And SBF said about this, Alameda still had, or he thought Alameda still had a net asset value of roughly positive $10 billion, and FTX had no holes on its balance sheet. And this belief was largely based on the large amounts of FTT tokens Alameda held that were closely tied to FTX. And challenged on whether these tokens were really liquid, he said, liquidity isn't a binary classification. Was it really Caroline's fault? The FTX documents tells customers to wire/transfer funds to a bank account called North Dimension. This was owned by Alameda, and from which Alameda then spent monies for its own purposes. Did you know that? I became aware at some point, SBF said. Do the terms and conditions explain that this account is Alameda? Is it mentioned anywhere? No. When was all this set up? Well, it was well before Caroline Ellison came on the scene. Well, therefore it wasn't her decision, was it? At least at first, to use those funds for Alameda. Point made. About this, SBF said, we should have segregated the funds between FTX and Alameda, and it was the settlement team's job to do so. Oh, so if Caroline wasn't there, then it was the settlements team. Anyway, as if by magic, Sassoon shows a document showing all the employees in the settlement team. Who does he recognise? Well, he recognises some of them. And what do? Well, he doesn't know the details of their day-to-day activities. So your testimony is that some unknown people spent $8 billion without your knowledge? Well, I don't think that's my testimony, SBF responded. The lavish spending. Is it true that you flew to the Super Bowl in a private jet? I don't recall how I got there. Is that because you flew on private jets so frequently? Gotcha. And we were back to redirect, where the defence get their last chance to question the defendant. So what were his reasons for not being involved in Alameda? He'd handed over the CEO role and was essentially uninvolved in core operations like day-to-day trading. And just after lunch on Tuesday, Judge Kaplan said to the jury, that concludes presentation of evidence in this case. So my takeaway on this, there's no smoking gun again. There's no black and white conspiracy audit trail that the prosecution have uncovered or shown. The fact that Sam ordered texts to be auto-deleted doesn't lead directly to the conclusion that those texts were all about the commission of a fraud. And then we have a dichotomy between Wang, Singh and Ellison on one hand and Sam on the other. The trio have all pled guilty and are all getting some reward, if essentially, for doing that from the prosecution, and have all said Sam did it. And now we have Sam saying, well, he didn't know, and he thought that those three were sorting out the mess and the issues with the system, etc. We have very different tellings of the same story between them. And the jury might just have to take a view on this, and that will ultimately decide the outcome of this case. People in court have said that Sam did come across as very unlikable, and particularly when being cross-examined, he was somewhat curt with the prosecutor and showed clear annoyance when asked to read out comments or similar that actually contradicted what he'd said. An evasive little dickhead was what one observer says. Well, there you go. We'll have closing arguments next, and then it really will be to the jury to decide. So if you have liked this content, please consider a subscription. It would be greatly appreciated. If you hit the notification bell, you won't miss out on what's coming next. And until that time, bye for now.